Hello, I'm Suzanne Atwell, and this is the Suzanne Atwell Show. Thanks for joining us. Last month, we took an in-depth look at beach erosion, big pass, and dredging options. We continue our coverage of the environment here on the Suncoast with a conversation about water quality with one of the most trusted sources in the country, Mote Marine Laboratory. You are in charge of the environmental health program at Mote. You're a staff scientist. Tell me about what your purview is and how did you get here?
Well, it's a really long story. So the goal of my program is to look at how natural and anthropogenic or man-made chemicals impact the environment, how the environment impacts our health ultimately, and ways to mitigate or alleviate those impacts.
And your program, and what is the purview of the program, you took this over in 2015, correct?
Yes, so the program has been long time established. I took it over in 2015. It's historically had most of its funding generated through red tide research. Outreach, education, the BCRS was a main focus of the environmental health program. It was created in 2006 to notify the public of red tide effects like respiratory irritation or dead fish. In 2015, when I came on, my first job was to redevelop the BCRS. And then since then, we've grown further into, we have 2 different apps, and then we're doing a new, we're working on a new technology with, it's a NASA-funded technology that we're working with NOAA and GCUS. It's a cell phone microscope where we have citizen scientists actually go out, take a sample, put it underneath the microscope, and they can actually upload video of their sample that calculates the concentration of red tide. So something that used to take days to get the information in will take 5 minutes with our volunteers.
So this sounds like state-of-the-art, red tide,
It is.
and you're doing it right here at Mote.
So red tide is the common name for a large quantity of the species Karenia brevis. It's a dinoflagellate phytoplankton, but what makes it so special is that it has a toxin in it. It's called brevetoxin. And this toxin can actually aerosolize, attach onto sea salt particles, move on shore, and cause respiratory irritation in healthy individuals. But for people with COPD or asthma, it can be very serious.
It sounds like a public health problem.
This
is what it's about.
It certainly is, and it is a naturally occurring phenomena. It's been happening since the 1500s. So the best thing that we can do right now is notify people where the effects are, where the bloom's going, so that they can make healthy decisions when going to the beach. That's where the BCRS comes in.
Great. It's all about water, and without water, we're nothing. Tell me about some of the partners that you're involved with. From what I understand, Mote is becoming internationally, it already is internationally famous for what you do here, but talk to me about the partners that are involved and how they're tackling water quality.
Okay, so our red tide program, there's 5 different research programs here at Mote Marine Laboratory working on red tide research. We partner with Florida Fish and Wildlife, the state Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Health, local government, Sarasota County, Lee County, Collier County, EPA. We have a project with EPA for water quality. Actually, we're looking at endocrine disruptors. And the interesting thing about endocrine disruptors is that they're all over the place. You can't buy something off the shelf without having to check and make sure it doesn't have endocrine disruptors.
Explain endocrine.
I probably should. They're chemical compounds that actually mimic or change the endocrine system or the hormones in your body. So there's something called parabens that are very common in lotions or face washes. And what this does for the product is extend the shelf life. But what it does for us is it mimics estrogen in our bodies. So we want to kind of stay away from them. In the natural environment, we see endocrine disruptors in the form of insecticides, pesticides, and other chemicals that end up in our stormwater, into our groundwater, and come out and actually affect our coral reefs. And that's what our project is with the EPA. We're looking at how insecticide chemicals end up affecting coral reefs.
I was just looking at some of your sea debris exhibit and what the result of the sea debris. I want to talk a little bit about that. That was a fascinating exhibit.
It is fascinating, and it's really interesting because here in Florida, we don't see a lot of trash washing up on our shores like they do in California. And it's kind of like if there's not an environmental problem in your face, you don't actively do anything about it. You don't change behaviors. But it's good for exhibits like this to be here to show people that this stuff is happening. In all my talks, I usually talk about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And there are so many people that have never even heard of it, that don't know it exists, and it's all at our hands.
Sure.
You know, it's littering. It's just plain laziness.
So how did you get to Moat? You're Florida all the way.
Yes, I am.
University of Florida all the way.
Yes, I am a triple gator. And I got into water quality, and I have such a passion for water, not only because, you know, we need it to survive, but also because I grew up in Buffalo, New York, right near the site of Love Canal.
Oh, sure.
Which is actually the environmental catastrophe that sparked the Superfund program. So I saw how important it was for us to protect the environment, because everything that we do to the environment eventually comes back to affect our health. And the way these toxins gets transported is always through water. So I really wanted to focus on water throughout college. So I went into environmental engineering. And then when I graduated, I actually got the first job that I got. I applied to 100 different places, but I'm very antsy. So I just took the first one, and it was in land development.
Yeah.
I had no clue what I was doing when I got into it.
But how does that go with your major, land development? It's all about what's under the land.
That's a really good question. So environmental and civil engineering they're hand in hand, because environmental engineering, you focus on water, wastewater, stormwater, and with civil, you're focusing on the pipes and transport, pumps, processing.
Infrastructure.
Exactly, infrastructure. So they're very tied in that. But when I was in land development, I saw that everything was being done the same way every time. And I knew that there was a better way. And that's why I went back and did my master's in stormwater pollutant design and pollutant transport. And then my PhD was in sustainable design and hydrologic restoration.
Well, it sounds like you're at the right place.
Yes.
Moat Marine is on the international radar all the time, and it's growing. So to be able to work here must be fantastic.
It is I'm dead honest when I say every day I come here, I have a smile on my face. I love work.
Absolutely.
I absolutely love my job.
No, it's a wonderful place. I served on the Sarasota Bay Estuary program, so it was wonderful getting an interest in what we're doing here, and obviously with Moat. So
Yeah.
it's wonderful to.
Yes, we partner with them as well.
Exactly, absolutely. I kind of thought you did, and that's
Yes.
critical. And also foundations. What's interesting to me is foundations are supporting the environment now in many ways, and that is crucial to our community.
It is, and it makes sense though, because as urbanization, civilization increases, our water is being put into more and more stressful situations.
Absolutely.
There's more demands and there's more pollution going into the water bodies. So it just makes sense that everybody is finally coming together for, improvements.
Special thanks to the folks at Moat for their help in putting this report together. Sarasota Bay is a unique and fragile ecosystem that has had some hard times as overdevelopment and lax regulation resulted in pollution and threats to marine life. Fortunately, things are getting better because of heightened awareness of the problem and the work of organizations and volunteers who are dedicated to making a difference. Case in point, Sarasota Baywatch.
Our mission is to engage the community and help restore and protect this beautiful asset that we have in our own backyard, Sarasota Bay and its associated waterways.
How many years have you been in operation here?
Sarasota Baywatch was established in 2007, so we've just finished celebrating our 10th year, which is really amazing for a small, all-volunteer organization that gets all of its support from the community.
Congratulations. Give me some highlights of what you are doing, you and all your great volunteers are doing for the community.
One of the things that we are doing that's our longest standing program is shellfish restoration, particularly bay scallops. Bay scallops disappeared from the bay back in the late 50s, early 60s when there was all the dredging, and then we had the population boom that led to degradation of the water quality as all the people came and untreated wastewater came into the system. And the seagrass beds were wiped out, and scallops in particular, kind of like canaries in the coal mine for the marine ecosystem. And without the seagrasses and with the lower water quality, they just disappeared in a very short period of time, and they haven't come back. But now that we have improved water quality and much better seagrass populations, it's time for us humans, or the community here, to give them a helping hand to see if we can't get them reestablished.
And another thing, tell me about the marine debris program. What's going on with marine debris?
That's the second program we're very excited about, and our volunteers and the community is really engaged with. We started by cleaning up the waterway islands, the spoil islands that were made when the intercoastal waterway was produced. They were neglected islands. And we have students and volunteers from the community come out with their boats and go to the islands and pick up the trash. And now we're also including removing invasive plant species and even starting to plant back some native plant species on the islands. That's one prong. A second prong is we've partnered with local divers, and we're having a series of underwater cleanups for the bottom of the bay, like Saprito Fishing Pier and New Pass. There is an amazing amount of plastics and debris, chairs, computers, laptops, all sorts of things on the bottom of the bay that's disruptive to the marine life. So our divers go down there and they bring up the marine debris, and then topside volunteers help sort it and recycle it.
So you have a lot of volunteers. How's it all funded?
It's all funded from the community. We don't have any state or federal funding. Once in a while we get a little bit of funding from a national level organization, but for the most part, it's from the community. The community is very involved and engaged and supportive of this effort, all of us together working to make the bay better.
Absolutely. And another program you referred to, students, youth, your leadership development. How does that work?
We think this is critically important to have our young people from the community get involved early, not only in volunteerism, but also in helping plan and run some of these events and really sink their teeth into being organizers and leaders with an environmental experience behind them, so that as they mature and become leaders in their own right in the community, they will have a passion for the environment and for maintaining the environment.
So at what level are students involved? What grade level? All the way up through college?
We have a program where we have a couple different things. One, we have an early reader book. It's kind of like a Dr. Seuss book for emerging readers and the young families, and it's a rhyming sort of story, but it tells the story of a young person who takes the initiative to clean up his or her own little puddle. And that's an example of how a little bit of effort by a single person can start to change a community. We also have high school students come out on a regular basis every year on the boats to the waterway islands. We work with the college level interns at Mote Marine for the scallop restoration program, and so that's about it.
That's wonderful. It's interesting. You have a lot of colleges. Students involved in this. How has that grown since you're on your 10th anniversary?
So we started 10 years ago with just a scallop search. That has grown to include fishing line and tackle cleanup from the mangroves where the seabirds live, also into now scallop restoration, and we've expanded into clam restoration, and the marine debris, both above water and underwater marine debris cleanup. And we have built opportunities for young people across all ages to get involved in all of these programs and activities.
Great. It seems to me this is a public asset. All this is a public asset. It's also a public health issue. How do you deal with getting that message out that we need to be serious about all this, because it is in our backyards here in this community, and how you're going to be dealing with this?
Absolutely. our favorite phrase is a healthy bay is everybody's business, because as you say, it is our backyard, and the beach, the water, it affects our quality of life, it affects our property taxes, it affects tourism, there's a lot of commerce around the water,
Sure.
and if we neglect the waterways, all of that will suffer. And it's so thrilling for us to see the community come together year after year, for 10 years in a row now,
Sure.
over a wide range of programs that we've developed. And the community, they come out and they work from early in the morning on a Saturday till lunchtime, and they'll come back, they'll be dirty and they'll be wet, and they'll say, that's the best thing I've done in a long, long time. We really enjoyed that.
So 10 years ago, up till now, where are we going to be in 5 years? How do you see the future of not only your organization, but how our collective consciousness about this environment?
And that's a good point. It's not just us, it's the whole community. The Sarasota County and Manatee County, they've worked very hard to improve the water quality. There's other organizations around town, and we all have to pull together. And there've been great strides have been made. The water quality is tremendously much better than it was before, and the seagrass is much healthier than it has been. And I think the community, across all sectors of the community, they're more engaged than they have been, and are taking a keener interest in the health and well-being of our backyard, which is really the gem of Sarasota. And a lot's been done, but there's still a lot to do.
Sure. What do you foresee in the next maybe year or two, how you will adapt certain programs to what's going on in the future?
Well, as I said, we've worked hard with scallop restoration. We've put in, our volunteers have released over 100 million baby scallops into the bay. They're little larval scallops. We've learned a lot from this. We have partnerships with Moat and the state of Florida, Sarasota County and the city. And that network is now in place, and we're using it to expand into clam restoration. They're native clams that used to be here in large numbers. And the hard-shell clams have declined tremendously. And both clams and scallops and oysters, they're the cleaners of the bay. They're constantly cleaning the water. So the more shellfish that we can get back into the water where they belong, the better we all will be.
Let's talk about living seawalls.
This is a really exciting project. Sarasota Bay has about 800 miles, something like 80 or 85% of the shoreline has been hardened with traditional seawalls, which are ecologically very sterile environments. You have some oysters and a few barnacles, but it's nothing like a native shoreline. Going back to native shorelines would be perfect, but it's not feasible. So living seawalls kind of bridge the gap. You can take an existing seawall and you can add to it structure. So the living seawall recreates in a man-made way the mangrove structure and the roots that used to be the natural nurseries for the marine life. And these are made here in Sarasota, designed here in Sarasota, produced here in Sarasota, and the first ones have just been installed up in by the city of Palmetto, and there's currently a project underway at O'Leary's here in Sarasota at Island Park, which in the first quarter of 2018 will be installed, and will be a great demonstration project for the community to come out and see how the city and the local governments are working to improve the water quality.
I remember I was on the commission during that when we voted to get that pilot program going, that how we deal with erosion with the hardened surfaces, how this works with the living seawall will prevent that.
Absolutely. A regular seawall, there's the wave hits it and it bounces back. There's a lot of wave energy that's destructive. The living seawall mitigates the wave energy, and it creates lots of nooks and crannies for crabs and fish, and it's a great feeding spot for the seabirds. They like to perch on the top of the living seawall and feed, and places for algae to grow, and a very diverse range of marine life can move back into a space that right now with traditional seawalls is very difficult.
Well, traditional seawalls, that may be hard fought on some neighborhoods. It's great to have a pilot and start this way, because you want to see how that will pan out in residential neighborhoods. That I would assume that would be a while before we could get those going.
That's right. And Moat is part of this project. The city of Sarasota has engaged Moat to look at the marine life before and after, and also measure wave energies and erosion parameters. So this is a great pilot project, and I think it's really fabulous that Sarasota is taking a leadership role in it.
Thanks, Larry, and to all the groups and individuals out there working to protect our environment. Next, you've heard of the expression, the canary in the coal mine, an early warning from our feathered friends that air quality in mines was dangerous. Birds are also a critical indicator of the health of our ecosystem. And to better understand how birds on the Suncoast are doing, we turn to our friends at Save Our Seabirds. David, here we are, Save Our Seabirds. Tell us about its mission.
The core of our mission is the 3 R's. Rescue, rehabilitate, and release. And we receive about 4,000 calls a year in our office upstairs from people throughout Sarasota and Manatee counties. And we have a network of volunteer rescuers in those counties that our dispatcher will call them, and our goal is to have a rescuer dispatch within 10 minutes of every call, and we almost always do. And so the birds come into our hospital upstairs. Our goal is to rehabilitate and release everyone, but of course that's not always possible, so the ones that are non-releasable, we give them permanent homes here in our Wild Bird Learning Center.
Fantastic. How are birds a barometer of our entire ecosystem?
Well, birds are considered a sentinel species in our environment because physiologically they're really not that different from people. The same endocrine disruptors that can cause cancer and birth defects in people can cause them in birds.
Sure.
So you know the saying, a canary in a coal mine.
Sure.
And it's literally a canary in a coal mine situation. If the birds go, we're in big trouble.
So the avian population at risk?
Very much at risk. Worldwide, there are about 10,000 species of birds. 1 in 8 is threatened with extinction in the next 30 to 50 years. In the U.S., it's even worse. There are about 1,000 species. A third of them are threatened with extinction in the next 30 to 50 years. And in Florida, we have a bird that's on the brink right now. It's called a grasshopper sparrow, and there are only a few dozen left. That bird has existed here for 3,000 years, and it's about to go extinct. The last bird that went extinct was in 1987. It was a different sparrow that was here in Florida. The grasshopper sparrow is about to go extinct.
So that is the most at risk. How about others that are at risk around here that people are probably more familiar with?
Well, quite a few birds are at risk because of climate change. But one of the most rapidly declining species in the world is called a red knot. And it's not native to here, but it migrates through here. And it comes from the Delaware Bay, Chesapeake Bay. And the reason why they call it a red knot is because it has a red coloring that it gets from larvae of crabs in those bays. And those bays are being destroyed, the larvae are being destroyed, the birds are being destroyed. Their population has declined 92% in the last about 20 years.
So generally speaking, what's your opinion on how things are? Are things getting better or worse? Is there a little light at the end of the tunnel here with what you are doing as well as other organizations are doing?
It depends on where you're looking. I think locally our bay has really improved quite a bit over the last few decades, and which is fantastic. But overall, you know, with climate change, sea level rise, there are a lot of birds that are at risk. Birds that nest on the beaches, if the beaches are inundated, where do they go? Birds that live in the mangroves, that roost in the mangroves, if the mangroves are underwater, where do they go? A lot of birds are being forced because of temperature change to move to higher elevations or higher latitudes. Well, when they move to those locations, there are already other birds there. It becomes very competitive. So it's not a pretty picture in the long run in the macro scale. Micro, in our local area, we're doing pretty well, but in a macro sense, there are alarm bells.
I used to serve on the Sarasota Bay Estuary program. How do you align with that? And they obviously are, it's one of the most important programs in the country, and it was an honor to serve on that. How do you align with that in what's going on here?
Oh, they're a great partner of ours. They've been very generous with grants over the last few years. One of the projects that we did here was a few years ago, we went through and ripped out all of our invasive species and put in native plants. And the Sarasota Bay Estuary program helped finance that.
Sure.
So now we've got all these native plants here with educational signs about the importance of the native plants to the environment and specifically to the birds. And so the estuary program is doing just a great job. And
Oh, that's
we
wonderful.
support them and they support us.
So if people see an injured bird, often you see, whether on Facebook, whether in an article about birds and Save Our Seabirds, what is the first thing that they should do other than perhaps calling Save Our Seabirds?
Call us,
But
yes.
what a lot of people see an injured bird. I see a lot of birds on roads, busy roads in our community, and I see cars honking at them, which is the most egregious thing I could possibly see, to get them out of the way.
Right.
What do they do? They should call you first, not tend to them.
If they can get the bird out of the way, if they feel safe doing that, get the bird, of course, out of traffic. If there's an injured bird and there's a potential predator around, try to get that out of that situation. If there, if there's a baby bird in particular, if there are cats nearby, get it to a safe area. But the best thing they can do is call us, because it depends on the species, the way you want to treat it. Because some it's safe to go ahead and try to pick up, some it's not so safe to go ahead and try to pick up. And we want to make sure that people stay safe and keep the birds safe. So if they give us a call at Save Our Seabirds, we can walk them through the process.
Well, and also now with their smartphone, they can take a picture and say, here is what I have found on this road. What is this? Help me. They don't know what it is.
Yep, we do that all day, every day. Our dispatcher up there, Holly, in the office, she says, can you text me a photo? They do, and then she can say, okay, well, this is this species of bird. Watch out, it's got a very sharp beak. Don't mess with that. Or if it's a vulture, it might throw up on you. Be careful of that. So she can guide them through it, and many times diagnose the situation. Like, for example, if a bird has an old broken leg that is healed, better leave it out there. It's survived. It's doing okay. So there are a lot of cases where they don't really need to come in, and they can just be taken care of out there.
Well, I think people want to take control of that because they see something like that and their hearts go out, but they just want to be able to do something.
That's right, and we always remind ourselves that anytime someone calls about a bird, and especially if someone brings in a bird, they are emotionally invested in that bird. And you have to really be aware of that, and we try to keep people posted on the progress of a bird if we can, if they brought it in.
Right, that sounds wonderful. And finally, a question about strategically, what do you see are some of the challenges ahead of you with this organization and what you're going to be doing?
Well, as you know as well as anybody, this wasn't always Save Our Seabirds here. It used to be called the Pelican Man.
That's right.
And Dale Shields had a great run here from the early 80s to the early 2000s, but then when he passed away, the place went bankrupt, and the reason was because there was no organization built around him. It was all about Dale Shields. And, and so our goal is to build a sustainable organization that's going to outlive all of us, where your grandchildren can bring their grandchildren someday. And so that's what we've been working towards for the last 5.5 years that I've been here. So we've got a great team in place. We've got a great business processes in place. We have a great board. We have a great advisory council now. We have great relationships with the community. So it's just really building a sustainable organization. And so the community's been very supportive, and we hope that continues.
Thanks, David. And a special shout out to all the volunteers at Save Our Seabirds. We hope you enjoyed the show and learned something about local efforts in addressing the state of the environment. Don't forget, you can always join the conversation online on Facebook at the Suzanne Atwell Show. And this program, as well as all our previous shows, are available on YouTube at Suzanne Atwell Show and our website, suzanneatwell.org. Well, that wraps up another show. We leave you with the sights and sounds of white pelicans on Sarasota Bay. See you around town.